Hello, good afternoon, friends. We are going to have our session on the topic of history. We are going to discuss the first chapter. The chapter is Historiography, Development in the West. So this particular session is divided in three parts. First, I will tell you briefly about what is history and the background. Then I will introduce you to the methods which are applied in history. And towards the end, we will talk about the development in Europe and introduction to various historians who have been the masters in the subject. So these are the three stages in which we will cover the presentation. In the meantime, you can just take down some tips or points as and when they occur. So first question is, what is history? So the word history comes from Herodotus. Herodotus was a Greek historian and he wrote a book, The Histories. So this is the earliest found example of somebody writing a history. So this is where the word history originated. Now, who is a historian? A person who writes history is called as a historian. And history basically is a narrative. It is a storyline of whatever event has taken place in the past. So somebody writes down in an accurate manner how it was happened or how it happened, and then who are the people who were involved, what was the scenario at that time. So that is a historical narrative. And a methodology which is used to explain history covers the topic of historiography. So essentially we have to understand what is the method which is applied for history. Now, when we talk about history, the important area is chronology. Now, what is the meaning of chronology? A chart which is like this. Now, in this, you will see that there is a timeline. This is also called as a timeline, right from 3 million years ago till the current time. So, it will cover various eras which are in between. And in those eras, what has happened? Who was the ruler? What was the kind of architecture? What was the kind of agriculture or field, and what kind of wars took place? A complete record which is based on a timeline. So that is called as a chronology of history. So the objective is to establish this. The objective is to understand the complete narrative, complete story behind each era. Now, if somebody wants to write history or do a research, then we have to find or prove the facts. So there are two ways of doing it. So one of the ways is a scientific method. In science, what do? We have an experiment to do. We use formulas, we apply laws, and in science we are able to prove. Like in physics or chemistry, we go to a lab and we are able to prove it. But that cannot happen in history. So neither we can go to a lab and experiment to find out how that event happened in the past. Neither we can use some formulas, neither application of laws are possible because there are no laws. History takes the course of action as it happens in time. So what do we need? We need an expert. And this expert is called as a historian. So whom we can call as an expert or a historian? What should be the qualities of that person? The qualities of that person is he should be able to interpret the script. He should know what was written at the time, whenever it was written, and then he should be able to verify. So there are various ways in which the verification of the document will be done or the script will be done. The writing style, lettering, stamp, seal, whether the date is mentioned on the document or not. So this is how the historian is able to study the past and formulate. Now I will give you a word that is the technique which is used by historians. You can write down that word manage L. You can see on the top right, manage, M-A-N-A-G-E-L. So what does that mean? So these are the sources. These are the various sources of information which a historian uses. So the first M stands for manuscripts. What are manuscripts? The traditional methods of writing or the traditional texts which are available either written on leaves or paper or on stone. So that is called as a manuscript. So he uses a manuscript. A stands for archaeology. So there are archaeological evidences. Some historic places are there which are unearthed, and then from there we find out, okay, this was the way in which people used to build their houses. This is the manner in which they used to use the utensils. This kind of pottery or this kind of textile was there available at that time. So this is archaeology. So first is manuscripts, next is archaeology. N is a special science which is called as numismatics. Okay. I put a spacing in between so that you are able to pronounce it correctly. It is numismatics. Now numismatics deals with coins. Even if you study the coins of today, you will find in that coin the year in which that particular coin was minted or produced, and the country in which it is made, the value of that particular coin, and even the metallurgy. Metallurgy in the sense the coins are made from special metal, so that not everybody is able to imitate them. So through this also some amount of history can be gathered. Who was a ruler? What would have been the value of this coin? And finding coins from different areas, you will come to know that, okay, this coin traveled from one area to another. So this entire science of coins and gauging history from that is called as numismatics. Then archival. Now normally archives, this is the word which we use for storage of files in computer, or even in your library we call that the books are archived. So this archival science. So we can keep historical records of various texts or books which are available to us, and that science is called as an archival science. So we have talked about manage L, in which manuscripts, archaeology, numismatics, and now archival science. Genealogy. Now genealogy, word comes from the word gene, that is genetics. So we have to know the genetics of the history. That means who was the ruler at that time, who was the next ruler, how many brothers that particular ruler had, and this brother, what was the area that he worked with, and what is the time period till that time the ruler was there. So all this kind of connections, relative connections, or either a connection of ruler or a family structure is called as a genealogy. And this is also a very important input in study of history. And then comes epigraphy. Now epigraphy is basically the inscriptions which are done on the structures which are there. Several monuments which are there in stone. In India also you will find several examples like Ajanta, Ellora, Canary Caves. So where the stone monuments are there, and on them you will find inscriptions. Now sometimes the stone monuments are earlier, they are done earlier in time, and somebody else comes on later and then inscribes on it and claims that it belongs to them. So many times you cannot be very sure that the time in which it is written or engraved on that particular stonework and the actual date at which that particular structure was made will match or not. So for that, researchers make use of linguistics. So if you study in India, there are various kinds of languages which are spoken across the nation. And you will find that every few kilometers the language changes. So when we put all this research sources together, we are able to create a complete picture of the society. So we are able to use manuscripts, we are taking advantage of archaeological sites, we are studying the coins of that particular era, then we are archival sources of the written information which is available. We are studying about the genealogy, that is the genetics, who were the rulers, where did they come from, until how long they ruled. And then epigraphy, that is the text which is inscribed on the stone through linguistics. So these are the sources of information. So always remember this word manage L, and with that you will be able to decode what it means. Next we have to understand what is the method which has been developed. Now there are two stages that you have to know. One was the traditional and one is the modern method. In traditional method, there was no scientific basis. Now this is what is culturally rooted everywhere. So I'll show you some of the examples which are there. So traditional methods are painting. You definitely know that there were cave paintings which are done in earlier times. Even in Ajanta Ellora, there are paintings which are there through which we can make out, okay, this was the attire of the people. This is how they used to do hunting. These were the tools that they were using, and this were the kind of buildings that they were staying in. Then storytelling. Now storytelling also is a culture in India. There are mythological stories of what has happened in the past, and then the generation to generation, this have been translated or transferred. So that is storytelling is another method of history. And the third one is songs and dances. So there are some songs, traditional songs of a particular region, which describe about a particular ruler or an event which has taken place in the past. So this is how is the traditional method. So all these methods which are there are non-scientific methods, but these were the traditional ways in which history was revised or history was transferred from one generation to another. So now we will come to the modern methods. Now modern methods are supposedly the scientific methods of history. Here I want you to understand the four characteristic features of modern history. The word you can take down is S-A-G-E, SAGE. Okay, so this SAGE stands for the four characteristics of modern historiography. Now what are they? The first is it has to be on a scientific principle. So a historian has to create a set of questions. He has to create questions which are scientific. Who were the people? When were they born? What was the kind of complexion? What kind of tools they were available at that time? What were the things that were their occupation? How did they used to depend on nature? What was the architecture? So these are the scientific questions one has to prepare. That is the first characteristic of the modern history. Second is anthropocentric questions, or anthropocentric questions have to be there. Anthropocentric basically means belonging to a particular culture, belonging to a particular creed. Now every era has particular type of people, specific group, and it belongs to a specific time. In the same region, after certain amount of period, the nature of the people will change. So this has to be anthropocentric. So it has to be correct with that particular era in mind. Then it has to be graphically represented. It has to be measurable. Now you have seen the timeline. Timeline is a graph. So that graph proves that, okay, this is where it stands in history. So some events which must have happened before this, some events which must have happened after this particular event. So this is SAG. And lastly, it is evidence. So it has to be based on certain evidences. You must have some supportive evidence to prove it, whether it is numismatics, whether it is linguistics, whether it is epigraphy. So whatever is the source, so that evidences has to be listed. So okay, on that basis, you are able to confidently say that this particular event has taken place in the past. Now briefly, we will just cover what are the various stages of development in Europe. The first is the development till 8th century. Till 8th century in Europe, there was focus was on science and philosophy. Then in 18th century, it was more philosophy centric, because they were governed by Christianity and they believed the philosophy of Christianity for everything. The Christian laws became everything. And 18th century, specifically, we are talking about 1737. In 1737, there is a university in Germany, Göttingen University. They started a department of history. So it was this pioneering work of this department that history became formalized as a science. And then we got some very well-renowned scholars in history, and they decided the course of how history should be written. So this was the second part of the presentation or the discussion today. Now we will go to the last part, where I will be talking about the historians who have shaped the history. Now the first and the foremost historian that would come across is Descartes. Now Descartes, you can look at his image. Now he is like one of the monitors in your class. Very shrewd, very sharp. He doesn't trust anyone. He will not trust that homework आपने किया है कि नहीं, आपको book दिखानी पड़ेगी. You will have to show the book. So his idea about history was that he wanted to verify the authenticity of the document. So he would take a document, so whether it is a numismatics document, whether it comes from epigraphy, he will refer that. So he believed that never accept anything till the doubts are cleared. So he will say that history has to be verified. He will not go by a song or dance. He will say whether it is written record is available, then he will believe. So whenever we are talking about historians, you have to remember two things. You have to remember Descartes. Then you have to remember what is the idea on which he worked, or what was his theory of history, and which book that he has written. So the book which was written by Descartes is Discourse on Method. This is the first pioneering work on history. The next scholar is Voltaire. And when you look at him, Voltaire is also a monitor, but he's of a mild type. What he does, he goes by the books. He will check your calendar, he will check your work, but he will also check the reality. So what Voltaire believed in was, so he would consider the social traditions, trade, economy, agriculture. So he will look at the complete picture of what the society was then, whether it is taking into account all the aspects or not. And then he will formulate the history. So he used to take the complete picture. And because he took the complete picture of history, he is also called as the founder of modern historiography. Because he believed not only the technical aspects of examining the facts were important, but he believed that complete picture, taking tradition, economy, agriculture, everything was equally important for him. So this is the second scholar of history. So first was Descartes, and the other one is Voltaire. So there is a very important figure in history. You will come across about him in various literatures or various sciences. He is Friedrich Hegel. He is popularly called just Hegel. Okay. Now Hegel was a very shrewd person, and his idea about history was that it has to be timeline based. It has to be very clear cut on a timeline. So the first graph that you saw is his contribution. He believed that everything should be marked very clearly. It starts where it ends. So it should be presented in a very logical manner. And why this was important? Because without a timeline, without a time frame, it is very difficult for a person to judge when that particular occurred, or when this particular event was occurring over here, what were the events which were happening somewhere else. So Hegel is credited to on this kind of a thinking in history. So there are two books which are given by him, which is called as Reason in History and Encyclopedia of Philosophical Sciences. So these are the two books which are contributed by Hegel. Okay. Now his idea about history is on dialectics. Now what does the dialectics mean? He would take 2 points of view, which is called as thesis and antithesis, both the points of view. Now in history, something will be written, say the king was very good, and the other view will be, people will say no, the king was not good. So he wants to take both the points of view. He wants to say which are the areas where the king is good, which are the areas where the king is not good, and then put the facts in place. So people thought that the king is not good because of these reasons, and the others thought that the king is good, the administrators thought the king is good because of these things. So he believed that presenting a picture of history should not be one-sided. That when you start praising the king, then you say that, okay, the king was very powerful, very good, and these were his qualities. But if there is a second side to it, Hegel started to say that, no, that second side is also important, and that must be presented. So his presentation of history was called as synthesis. So he took the hero, the anti-hero, and then he put both the things together to form a synthesis. So that is the contribution by Hegel. Another important figure is Karl Marx. So Karl Marx stands a separate figure in history. So Karl Marx is very popular in Russia. The communism in Russia is credited to him, and his book Das Kapital is very famous. It is famous amongst the economists. So what Karl Marx found, when Karl Marx studied all the history of the world, he said that one common thing which he found in all the histories was it was always a struggle between the common people and the rulers. So he said that we must include the struggle of the common people. So his idea about was he thought that the people form the crux of this history. So they should also be included. So his version of history was the struggle between the haves and have-nots. So czars, who were the rulers of Russia, versus the common people or the working class. So his version of history was between the haves and have-nots. So are you clear distinctly about the version which is given by Hegel? Hegel believes in positive and negative. Okay, so talking about one person in a positive manner and a negative manner. So both together comes as a synthesis. But in case of Karl Marx, he believes that it is the class struggle between haves and have-nots. So both has to be considered. And because of him, the working class got unified, and they got a voice in history, and they got a political voice. And as a result of that, communism was established in Russia. Next important figure is Leopold von Ranke. He is popularly called as Leopold Rank. Now Leopold Rank again was doubtful about the authenticity of documents. So he said that no, just because a document is available, we cannot trust it. It has to be verified. So he would use cross-examination of documentation by various resources. Now he has written 2 books, that is the Theory and Practice of History and The Secret of World History. Now these are the cover pages of the 2 books which he has written, and he doesn't believe in the imaginative narration of history. Like in the traditional way, sometimes the historians used to incorporate that also, that there is a poetry or there is a song or there is a particular dance form, and they will relate to it and they will say, okay, that is also part of history. But Leopold Rank said, no, this imaginative way of writing history will not work. It has to be critically examined for the authenticity. Now he also wanted that some kings used to sponsor writing history. So he said that no, that imagination and one-sided history should not be written. This narration of history has to be based on very sound grounding principles. So he used a telescopic view or a microscopic view or a magnifying glass to view how the history was written. And there are some school of thought, that is ideologies or ways in which the writing of history is done. So one is called as an Annales school of thought. Annales school of thought was started by French historians. Now they believe that history is not only about kings and leaders and palaces, but they believe that it is also about the common people and how they have struggled. Now if I have to write history about the Satyagraha of Gandhiji, so many books are available on how Gandhiji led the movement and what was the statement done and how he went across it. It was completely person centric. So in the analyst school, how they will look at this Satyagraha, they will talk about how people faced it. Now the common man lost his job and he became a participant of the Satyagraha, and how his family suffered and what was the sacrifice done by the family members. So analyst school of thought basically looked at history from the perspective of common people. So this is also a very novel dimension of looking at history, which comes from NL school. Then there is a feminist view, the feminist view of history. So just like the common man's opinion was important, some historians felt that the woman-centric history is not written. It is always men-centric. How the men have led the world. Even the language, human. It is not human. It is human. So there were a lot of objections to the use of words. The feminist angle, when it came up, they thought that no, the woman's representation in history is important. Even women have played a very important role in shifting the way the history of the place works. So it was not always occupation. It was also the way they have contributed in employment. They have contributed in occupation. So like that, the women's role in history became important. And it was by Simone de Beauvoir. Simone de Beauvoir promoted writing articles on women's role, and that is how history also took a dimension which is feminist dimension. So these are the various thoughts, and the last supreme authority who came to write about history was Michel Foucault. And Michel Foucault's work were basically on the transitions of history. Now he believed that okay, it is important to write history era-wise. So that one era happened, now the next era happened. But he believed that why that era changed. So there is something which is happening in between. So he tried to fill the gaps which were there. So his archaeological approach, or his approach of looking at history, is popularly captured in the book Archaeology of Knowledge. So this is the book which he has written. So he believed, yes, the chronological order of history is important. That is, the writing the history in timeline is important. But when you are writing the history from one era to another era, you have to also focus on the gap areas. So these gap areas also needs to be filled, because one era ends, then what happens at that time? And then when another era begins, then what is the process which is happening before that? So he found that not only history must cover specific eras, but also work on the gaps which are there. So these are some of the Western philosophies and Western thoughts on the subject of history. So what we observe is history as a subject has evolved continuously, not only in terms of architecture, literature, painting, music, dance. Every time some historian has come up and given a new interpretation. So we will just take a quick summary. So we have talked about Descartes, Voltaire, Hegel, Karl Marx, Rank, and then we have talked about two schools, ideologies. One of them was the Annales, and the other one was feminist school. And lastly, we talked about Michel Foucault. So his theory of filling the gaps. Now, René Descartes focused on documentation, and Voltaire focused on the cultural aspects. Remember him, the monitor who is taking care of the class. And then there is Hegel, who talks about the dialectics of positive and negative aspects of the thing and bringing it together. And there is Karl Marx, who talks about the class struggle. That is the struggle between the people who have and those who do not have. So haves and have-nots. And then there is Ranke, who talks about authenticity of the documents, where he cross-verifies through various literatures. And these two school of thoughts, Annales, which is essentially about people struggle. We talked about the example of the Satyagraha, where most of the historical works you will find is on the leadership, but it does not focus on how the common man has faced that. So that is Annales school of thought. And then there is the feminist school of history, which brought women at the center. And lastly, we talked about Michel Foucault, who has talked about filling the gaps. When one era ends, the other era begins, and how to fill that up. I think by this we come to the end of the presentation, and this was a quick review. This was a quick review of